All right, well, good morning, everyone. And, this I think is by far and away the most joyous reason I've been at Coronado Park since I got elected. So we're very excited about this. We now have a future plan for Coronado Park. You might recall, it was about 9 months ago, maybe. Of course, we closed it. I think we all remember the history and why and so forth. And we said, look, we don't know what we're going to do next. We're going to sort of look at a lot of different options. And there were a lot of good options to think about. And I want to just highlight, I think, why we liked this one. It's basically because we got money for it. So I'm just going to be straight up. Thanks to the state of New Mexico, our legislators and the governor, they were interested in funding a project that'll help this region with respect to fire and have a neighborhood component. And so, when you have somebody willing to fund a project, it makes choosing the project pretty easy. There were not alternative projects that had funding. There were all sorts of interesting ideas, but not that could be funded and done in the short term. So we're going to talk about what we're working on here, but in general, this area, of course, was at a real inflection point. I do want to remind everyone that the Coronado Park situation with the homelessness did exist before our administration. We're not here to sort of talk about the past, but I want to emphasize this was a long-term building issue. And I say that because before even then, the fire department, this is now way under the previous administration, had always wanted to refurbish this station. This is one of our oldest, most cramped, difficult, and busiest fire stations. So I share that history because this project is a little bit of a throwback that's been sort of refurbished for the modern era. Plans for renovating this fire station go back, at least 10 years, if not further. And they were always on hold because we didn't know what we were going to do at this park. And when I say we, I'm talking about two administrations and multiple city councils and so forth. So now I think we have some real clarity. That's the very good news. So what are we doing? Basically, first we're going to rehab Station 4. As I mentioned, that has been in the works for a long time. It has always been at the top of the list, but was moved just to the second of the list, basically because we didn't have a theory in terms of how it would work with this park and, of course, that city building, which we bought last year, the City Sport Annex. Now we know how these are all going to kind of fit together. So what we're going to do out here is this is going to be a training facility and a centralized hub for special operations. And this is a great location for it, being in central New Mexico and in the heart of the city, access to the freeways and so forth. And of course, being next to an existing station is also very important. But we do anticipate this facility being used statewide all around New Mexico. So for our friends who are out of Albuquerque and wondering, hey, what's in it for the rest of the state, because this was state money, we're going to coordinate with State Fire and the departments around us to utilize this facility. Now, an example of what this department does is even things like forest fires. AFR stepped up in a major way during the Calf's Canyon and Hermit's Peak fire. Of course, we also know what we do with forest fires, whether it's in the Sandias or in the Bosque. So this is going to be part of the training that they do here. So this is something, again, that's been desperately needed in the central area of the city. And so it is going to support literally the heroic work that AFR does each and every day. Now, just a little bit about the design. We want to try and definitely build in a community component. So we're going to have some community space. We're not exactly sure what that looks like, whether it's a plaza that might reflect on our firefighter heritage and the connection to the neighborhood. It might also speak to the history of this park. We might have a little homage to the train that I used to play on when I was a kid. So we're going to have space that will be accessible and usable by the community. But it is going to be controlled by AFR, so it's not officially going to be a park, but it will be public space made available. For the time being, we are keeping the dog park across the street, and we're going to hear from one of our neighborhood leaders, but want to remind everyone we are building an awesome new, doubling the size essentially of Wells Park. So just 2 or 3 blocks down the street that way, there's going to be wonderful new green space for the neighborhood. So again, these are going to be in conjunction, and actually net, I think the neighborhood will have the exact same amount roughly of green space that they did when they had Coronado, but they'll have a brand new park with an awesome playground right next to a community center. So it's taken us some time, but I think we are getting it right out here at Coronado Park. So with that, today, let's hear from our chief of fire, but also I want to mention, not that it matters, but there is a change in sort of jurisdiction. This piece of land will now be sort of owned by AFR as opposed to Parks and Rec. Irrelevant to the public, but that's also kind of why AFR is so excited and they're all out here. But we do have our Parks and Rec folks over here. They're going to help take care of it in the meantime and work on the transition and so forth. So with more on this, our Chief of AFR, Emily Harmio. Chief.
Great, thank you, Mayor. We want to touch a little bit on the historical aspect of the park and the station. Because we have had this fire station for so long. So our firehouse has always been an important part of the Wells Park community. The old fire station was actually at 5th Street and Mountain, and it was the first hub of the neighborhood and eventually became part of what is now the Wells Park Johnny Tapia Community Center. Coronado Park was established in the 1950s and has also been an important area for the residents of Wells Park and the surrounding neighborhoods. Our fire station, Fire Station 4, which is located adjacent to Coronado Park, was built in 1961. So like Mayor said, this is one of our stations that we've needed to rehab for a really long time. So we're really excited and thankful for all the funding that is going to get us to that place. The construction of the new public safety training facility at Coronado Park honors the past while meeting the needs of the community and public safety moving forward. The existing fire station will become the new hub for AFR's Special Operations Divisions. This new operational hub will centralize and consolidate AFR's multiple task forces for more efficient and rapid deployments both locally and regionally. AFR's Wildland Task Force has deployed to numerous wildfires all over our state and our country. They have deployed in the recent years in New Mexico, Texas, California, Arizona, Wyoming, Oregon, and Alaska. Our HTR, which is our Heavy Technical Rescue Program, that task force has responded to trench rescues, wilderness rescues, and MCI incidents regionally. Our Hazmat Task Force will also be housed out of here, and it's deployable statewide for incidents on our interstates and to assist neighboring jurisdictions with hazardous materials response and mitigation. Fire Station 4 is also near and dear to me, as this was the station that I was assigned to as a rookie firefighter. I actually ran my first call in Coronado Park with somebody that was having a diabetic emergency. Most firefighters remember our first call, so mine was right behind me. For firefighters, we spend about a third of our lives living at a fire station during our career. And so the rehab work that is going to take place at Station 4 is very important to our firefighters. But also our firefighters that bid to this station and our retirees that worked at this station really love the Wells Park neighborhood and community that they serve in this area. And so everybody's just very excited about this opportunity to rehab the station and the park in partnership with the community. All of us at AFR are incredibly grateful to Mayor Keller, City Council, and all of the legislators and our governor that has helped make this project possible. Next, I'd like to introduce our next guest. We have Doreen McKnight with us, and she's the Wells Park Neighborhood Association President.
Good morning. We are excited to get a new fire station in the area. I think it's been a long time coming, and it'll be a real benefit to the neighborhood. And we look forward to working with the city on planning and designing part of this space to still be a public amenity. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And just in terms of timing, a couple of things. We're excited to sort of get started on the transition of this. And so we're going to break it up into phases like we usually do. And so, we're going to do sort of the sort of external facade transition and so forth. And we'll work on some design and we'll get it done. But it's going to be kind of an incremental process depending also on what the needs are for the different units that Chief spoke about. Lastly, I just want to touch on, look, we've talked a lot about our success during the legislative session in terms of getting funding for our city. We got $100 million. That's more than we've ever gotten. So thank you again to our legislators and also the governor. Also, there's some signature pieces that we were able to accomplish. This is one. We said, if you give us the funding, then we're going to move fast, and that's what we're doing here. The second one, of course, is warrants. We did get the $10 million. which we need to share statewide for our warrant backlog. So it's more on the Albuquerque Police Department side. More on that tomorrow. But just want to remind everyone that we did secure that funding, so we're very optimistic about how that will help our city. So with that, I think we can take, Stacy will take some questions.
Yeah, Peter?
Between your administration and the Berry administration, there's been a lot of talk of these other ideas that you alluded to at the very beginning. Housing, there was the fire truck park idea, the Berry administration had the skate park truck idea. Given that you've got this dog park to work with and that little green strip there, and who knows what else in terms of city property there, what is the general status of those different ideas, and how are you feeling about them personally?
Well, they were all good ideas, and they just didn't get funding. So, I think this is just a situation of sort of bird in the hand kind of thing where there's a public safety need for this facility, and that is what the state recognized and why they funded it. The other ideas were wonderful community assets, but I think we'll always take literally supporting the operations of hazmat and heavy rescue over, a new amenity playground or something to that effect, especially when we have a new park down the street. So I think the big difference is with Wells Park being expanded, we think that real community space is going to be there, and that's a good thing. We don't necessarily need it right here.
But you do have land to work with, though, between the dog park and that strip that you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Are those ideas off the table for what you've got left to work with?
They're totally on the table, subject to funding and neighborhood input. So, absolutely. If we have funding and we have a way to make the dog park have something like a, fire truck slide / homage to the train, we'll take it. But right now there's no design and there's no funding. So I don't want to, put the cart before the horse, to use another old analogy.
All right. Any timing? DC Meisner, I think, could speak to that question.
Sure. So we're currently waiting for the funding to come in to start the design process. We're expecting that probably around fall of this year. Once all the funding comes in to start design, we're looking at a 2 to 2.5 year process to deal with phase 1, which will be the fire station construction.
And then with that funding, how much of it else is already for
So there's $5.25 million from state capital outlay and $8 million in GEO bond. We also have a federal earmark request for an additional $2 million.
And then with the skate park, is that going to stay as well?
The skate park, Parks and Recreation is going to work on a plan to put that in another part of the city, hopefully in the same community here.
All right, and then after George's question for Doreen, we'll take a question from Faith from KOAT.
I think that it's stayed pretty clear around here, and I think that the neighboring businesses have been pretty appreciative of the city's efforts to maintain a safe space over here and clear out the park. I think there were some issues when individuals moved to First and Indian School, but I think the city's worked really hard to clear up that area as well.
I just want to add one thing. I know, well, go ahead and ask your question. All right, let me do my, for the downtown news, the chief was telling me about this. One thing that we're going to try and fix is the parking and ingress and egress. Whether you're looking at it for fire or you're looking at it for public space like the dog park, we are going to look at that in the design, because like right now there's really, one, there's nowhere to park, but two, these are busy, high traffic one-way streets. So, it doesn't make sense to have like a giant park on the corner of a freeway off-ramp. So I think we're going to try and figure out exactly like how that would work, especially with some of the parking and so forth over there. So we'll see, but I think I want to highlight that's part of the design process, is trying to understand what area here should be like pedestrian friendly and what shouldn't, because it's right next to a highway and fire trucks are, running on and off those ramps. Stacy, you can go ahead.
Hi, so I have two questions. In regards to you guys fixing the situation with the fire station, but this is with the firefighter shortage as well, because that's been an issue nationwide and statewide, given the fact with everything going on with the wildfire season. And then what's the current status of the city's homeless crisis? Because I know you spoke to that briefly, and we know that many were left displaced after the closure, and then they went to the I-40 underpass, and then the city closed that, and then you guys put them into temporary shelters. But like, what's next?
Hi, thank you for the first question. Just to make sure I heard it correctly, you wanted to know if this would help with the firefighter shortage? Sure. So, yep, great question. So we're in a really great place, staffing-wise right now. We're with our current cadet class, AFR is short 9 positions. So we have some different challenges as a department as far as how we utilize our staffing that we're working through with like paramedic issues, not having enough paramedics, and also people being able to work in different positions. This station, it won't really relate to that per se, and we're very lucky with different shortages that are in different places that we're only down, like I said, with this cadet class 9 positions right now. But what this does help us do is increase our availability during times that we're doing training. So making this a training location in the middle of the city is very helpful for us to maintain our ISO rating. We're an ISO 1 department. Right now, all of our fire stations have to go to training on the west side. We're off of 98th and Central is where our other training facility is. So having something centrally located helps our, when we have to do training with on-duty crews, they're not driving all the way to the west side and then back to their stations. And so having this facility here is really helpful for that. And then also that our apparatus, our hazmat, and HTR programs, having them more centrally located helps us respond citywide. We just moved our HTR program to this station in March, and they used to be located in Nob Hill, but they're a citywide response. So this location off of I-20 and I-45, I-25 and I-40 helps us get anywhere in the city more quickly. So those are the 2 ways that it'll really help us.
So when it comes to homelessness and some of the encampments, there's, I think, a progression on how the city's been improving the way we deal with this. So when Coronado closed, you know, it was a little choppy. There's no doubt about it. And there were so many people here. It was very hard sort of for our different providers and things to digest. So it, you know, as we know, a lot of folks sort of set up a mini version of Coronado Park over on First Street. But we recently took care of that and we did a much better job. We paired that with housing vouchers in sort of a Houston style. We copied what Houston does. And then we also paired it with fencing. So we want to appreciate New Mexico Department of Transportation. They also fenced an area, and that's important because that is state land. So every time we had to do anything there, we always had to ask permission, and there's all sorts of stuff. Really, it's their responsibility. But we worked with them to get that done, and now they put up good fencing. And so we think that's going to help. And the last thing is, you know, now we have 4 encampment teams, and they clean up 200 or so encampments a month in each quadrant of the city. And those were just, you know, sort of put into operation around February. It took us 6 months to set those up. So the city's in a vastly different place, both to house people and also to clean. And so that's much different than it was 9 months ago when we had to close this park.
Right, no, so I'm aware that you guys shut it down. You guys did after that, because I know the city provided some sheltering and all that good stuff, but like, you know, what's next? So I think you did answer that, and I know even though it's been shut down, you know, there's still complaints about them around there, but the fact that what you said, you guys are going to check in periodically and get that taken care of, and thank you for answering that. And then just for clarity, because I didn't hear clearly, did you say $100 million was funded for the project or $10 million for this project?
This one's a little over 10. I think it's 15 in total.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 15 million total. Yep.
15 total.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there will be in the press release the funding that we have listed out in the press release to go out about it.
Yeah. And the other housing thing is we did purchase the Sure Stay Hotel. And so that's under now refurbishment. So we're working to create more longer term housing options. And so that's 100 or so units that, you know, is just freshly purchased last month. All right.
We have a couple of more questions. Just for you, Mayor Fuller, this was a site for a pickup and drop-off location to take to shelters. Has the city found a new spot for that drop-off?
Yeah, the current spot I think is over by the Rock, but there are multiple spots. So this is another thing that our city does. Originally, and again, this was a past administration, the reason why Coronado Park became this encampment, and again, this was now about 8 years ago, is because they moved the drop-off here. Used to be at Hope Works down the street. Now we have multiple drop-offs, so it's more like a bus route, and that's working much, much better.
And in terms of the facility, will this be used every day for training or just kind of as storage for equipment?
I think it's a mix, but...
So in terms of every day, we'll have a fire station that responds to 911 calls 24/7 housed here, and then our coordinators, our programs will all be moved down here. And then as far as training, there will be some classrooms and then a training tower, and so there's likely going to be the opportunity to have pretty frequent training here. I can't say daily, but it'll be pretty often that we'll have crews over here doing different trainings. Sure. Great question. And it's I think a lot of times people don't understand all of the things that the fire department does. So all of our firefighters have multiple ways that they're cross-trained. And so when you get into the department, you might come in with no training, and then we offer a lot of different certification classes because we're an all hazards response, which means we do more than just fight fire and run EMS calls. And so we have 3 special operations programs. One is Wildland. I think that's the one that most people are familiar with. So we have firefighters that have multiple levels of training. Some of them come to us from Wildland teams into our department, and they're able to operate not only when we have incidents here in the city, but they have positions that they can hold when we deploy resources out to help in other areas of the state. So our Wildland program is probably the one that most people are familiar with. We also have a hazardous materials program. We have 2 stations right now that are designated hazmat, Station 17 on the west side, and then Station 13, which is kind of centrally located off of San Mateo and I-40. So all of our hazardous materials firefighters are trained not only as firefighters and EMTs and paramedics, but they have additional hazardous materials training. So most recently, we helped with a suspicious package last week that had been encountered at Workforce Solutions. So we worked with state police on that. So anytime there's hazmat spills, any of those kinds of things, that team works on those types of incidents. And then lastly, we have our heavy technical rescue program. They specialize in all different kinds of rescue, confined space. We help with open space rescues out, primarily in the mountain over there. They do a lot of different like high and low angle type rescue, and so they have very specialized training, and because of these specialties, we don't use those skills very often. And so part of being a firefighter in one of those specialties is the training component is super important, because you have to train so that when you have to go tie a bunch of knots to rescue somebody, that you've practiced it over and over again so that you're confident in what you do. And so that's why this training facility is so important. It's really, we hold these trainings all over, but we can coordinate it all here, and then also deploy out of here as well. So it'll hold our resources as well. To answer the other part of your question, we will also be able to store and consolidate all of those resources in this location.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming out today.